Welcome back to the Smart Money Show. This week, our special guest is none other than Dion Beg, award-winning mortgage broker here in Toronto. Dion and his team at kangamortgage.ca have been doing a stellar job. Their track record speaks for itself. And we're going to get into a lively discussion about all of the little intricacies that are beneficial to the sandwich generation. And I think you're going to really enjoy this discussion. And we're going to leave all the contact info for Dion and his team down below in the description. So without further ado, this is the interview. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Smart Money Show. It's myself, Charlene, and our special guest, Dion Beg of Kanga Mortgages. If you want to take a moment, Dion, and maybe give us just a little overview, tell us a little bit about who you are, and we'll get into the discussion
So
today.
the name, I'll start with the name Kanga first. So it's a kangaroo. What is a kangaroo doing in Australia? Sorry, in Canada. Well, I spent most of my life in Australia. That's where I grew up. And I figured if I'm going to name a company, I'll name it something that people might remember. And people generally remember animals. So Kanga Mortgage is what it is. But yeah, guys, I run a team based out of the GTA. We service Ontario as well as the other provinces. And I've been fortunate in the past years to be ranked in the top 75 mortgage brokers in the country, funded over $1 billion in mortgages. And our goal as a brokerage isn't ever about just the transaction. We approach every client in their lifetime to solve four big problems. Okay. Buy your first home, get debt free, set up your kids, and set up your retirement. And it just so happens that in the past, I was a financial advisor, and I can see how real estate can be a tool to achieve those things that people traditionally find with their mutual funds and traditional financial planning. So yes, we are a mortgage brokerage, but we're there to help people with all of those phases of their life. And it's funny now, I've been in the business long enough now where I am helping people's parents and their children and their grandchildren. So it's nice to be part of that for everybody.
Awesome. Well, that's perfect. That's right in line with what we're aiming to approach and solve, and that is our audience. So if you're new to the discussion, what we're aiming to do here is to bring knowledge and information to the sandwich generation. So those people with elderly parents that requiring whether it's financial or physical or medical support, and also their adult or dependent children, and how to navigate that middle ground that I think a lot of us are in that phase and facing those challenges today. So thank you very much for joining us. So yeah, I mean, I guess what we would like to do is just sort of do a quick overview of what the sandwich generation is. If you could define it in terms of, your client base, how do you see them in terms of fitting into, the products that you offer and those sorts of things?
Yeah, sure. So in my perspective, that's anyone aged sort of between 40 to 60. It may be smaller, but that's the range that I see. And people who fall into that age group, that 20-year window, are generally having to help their elderly parents, be it, financially, physically, emotionally, at the same time, help their younger or even adult children with whatever's going on there. But even the adult children are needing assistance. It used to be the case that, you send your kids to a good school, they get a good education, a good job, good income, and they're off, and that's them. They're set up for life. Unfortunately, the world has changed significantly in these last 20 years, where affordability is just so tough that those people in the middle, those 40 to 60-year-olds, are feeling compelled to help both the people above them and the people below them, and that's hence the sandwich, so to speak.
Yeah. I guess one of the questions, or one of the big questions we get is, what is the first step? So a lot of these people are trying to figure out, what is the next move? So, children at home or have returned home from university or, renting and coming back home. Parents who are getting to that age where their, primary home is no longer suitable, health concerns and so on. And what we're seeing is, I think the trigger is most often one of the grandparents is either passed away or, institutionalized, hospitalized. And it's sort of forcing everyone to reevaluate the overall picture. And our take is that, we want to be there to support them and help them through, like you said, in some of our other discussions, with real estate holding so much equity, with that being the linchpin, there must be a way to help, the greater good, through, alleviating some of that financial pressure. Then you can move the puzzle pieces. Can you speak to a little bit to that and what
Yeah,
sort of
yeah. I
things
mean, there's a
people
lot
can
to
look
unpack
forward
there,
to?
but in terms of where to start, what I will say is, when you get on an airplane and they do the safety instructions and they
Mm.
say, if we run out of oxygen, these masks are going to fall. You remember they say the first thing you do, don't look after your kids, don't look after anybody around you. They say, fit your mask first, okay? Which means give yourself the oxygen first, because if you don't have the oxygen, then you're not able to help the others around you. And as it relates to finances, if you don't have the financial oxygen to be able to just find a stable foundation for yourself, then no, you won't be able to do the things that you know you should be doing and want to be doing. So the first thing that I would look at for a person who's feeling that pressure from both, from the older and younger generations is, first, are we on a stable foundation? Sometimes that means analyzing existing debt loads, restructuring finances, taking, just this week, a lady came to me with $40,000 worth of credit card debt, carrying it at 22% interest rates,
Wow.
plus some business loans and other things. And we consolidated that. We dropped her overall interest by something like, well under 5% from 22%. And her monthly payments, we dropped by $3,100. It's 37 grand in 1 year, just by moving some stuff around, stretching out amortizations. And in my business, we get to help people and we give them such a sense of relief that, some of these people get quite emotional. And she now knows that, her future is going to be way better than it was just a couple of months ago. So setting that foundation, making sure that you've got your cash flow covered, right?
Yep.
Beyond that, then it's okay. Now it's the triage. Okay, who do we need to help first? Beyond this, right? Is it my parents? Is it my children? And I guess it just depends on the circumstance. But I'll give you a couple of scenarios, and
Sure.
I'll draw on one that you put forward there, Greg. Where let's say we have elderly parents, maybe in their 70s or 80s, with one of those parents passing away. Let's say in most cases it's the grandmother who survives the woman. Women live a little longer than you and me, Greg.
Thanks.
And yeah, so the question will then be, okay, how do we look after this person who's probably lived with their partner their whole life and depended on them and so for that long? One option is to have them move in with you. One option is to leave them exactly where they are and hope they're fine, or arrange for some level of care where they live. And the other option is to move them to an aged care facility. There are probably other options, but they're the big three that we see. And I'll tell you, and this probably doesn't surprise you, over 90% of older Canadians want to die in the home that they're in. They want to age in place. They don't want to be moved, right?
Right.
And if they're physically and financially, emotionally able, they want to stay in the home that they're in because they feel like moving in with family is going to be a burden on that family. Again, it's not for everybody, but I'm just sharing what I've heard amongst my conversations with clients. So let's just say that this 80-year-old lady would like to stay in the home that she's in, but she needs some help. So, that then falls on her children, her 50-year-old children in that scenario.
Right.
And financially, we all know that people don't have extra money to pay for extra services right now. So what we're seeing is that older woman who's in her 80s probably is in a home that's worth $1 million plus. Doesn't have to be worth that. Could be worth 500 grand. Let's use that example. Let's say it's a $500,000 condo. But right now, we can actually get financing for that elderly person so that we can put some money in their bank account or into a monthly cash flow for them where they can draw on that and use that to pay for the services and the help that they might need. This leads to the question of, hang on, this person's a pensioner. probably making 20 grand a year or less, how do they qualify? And sometimes they have good pensions. Maybe they were teachers or nurses and they make 80 grand a year in retirement. We'll get them a regular mortgage in that scenario. They can service that debt. But for the most part, they don't have that extra income. And we would get them a specialized mortgage product called a reverse mortgage. Um, is that something that you've spoken about on this program yet?
Yeah, we touched on it, and I'm familiar with it, and like you said, there was a stigma. I don't know, 10, 15 years ago was, sort of taboo, but it seems like, especially post COVID, the world is upside down, and it is, I believe, a very attractive option that, I'd like to hear more
Yeah.
about.
No, you hit it on the head there. In that, even myself, I was purposefully ignorant of the reverse mortgage product up until about 4 years ago. And the reason I was because the very little research I had done on it only led to bad outcomes. So let me share
Mhm.
what those are with you. That the things that I read. I read that if you sign up for a reverse mortgage, the bank will end up you'll end up owing more to the bank than the house is worth. Also, that if your spouse passes away, that they'll take the mortgage away from you and or they'll take your house, right? And here's the funny thing: all of that is true in the United States of America, but none of that is true in Canada. Okay.
Good.
So all the horror stories, and I did a search, there's like 43 million web pages on reverse mortgages, and about 41 million relate to the United States, right?
Mm.
And yes, the United States, and this won't surprise anybody listening, the United States is a lot less regulated than us in Canada. And so because of that, maybe it's good for some aspects of the economy, but it's very bad, especially for the people that we need to protect in society, including our seniors. So before I go too deep there, let me just take a step back and explain to the audience what a reverse mortgage is, so
Sure.
they just get a general idea. And I'm going to use an example of $100,000 loan mortgage, right? And let's say you get it from a major bank in Canada. What will happen there is you'll probably pay something like, we'll just for simplicity, we'll call it $700 a month, okay,
Okay.
which is about $8,400 a year in payments. And you started the year with a mortgage of 100, and you'll end the year owing about 98 grand. Okay, we'll just use that as a simple example. So you paid $2,000 off your mortgage. That's a regular mortgage. And what happened to the rest of that payment? It's interest, of course. Okay. Now, with a reverse mortgage, let's say we take the same $100,000 mortgage. You start the year owing 100. Throughout the year, you make no payments. There is no requirement of repayment of a reverse mortgage. So then the question is, well, how does the bank make money? The way they make money is you start the year owing 100,000 and you end the year owing more than that number. In this case, it might be, say, 106,000 based on today's interest rates. So a reverse mortgage is reverse in a couple of ways. Number one, it grows in a balance, whereas a regular mortgage goes down, a reverse mortgage goes up. So that's one aspect of reverse. The other is that depending on how you wish to take this money, you can have your mortgage pay you rather than you pay your mortgage. Okay.
Mm.
And the way that you can access this money from the bank is either in a lump sum. Let's say you take 50 grand lump sum. Okay, great. Or you can take, let's say, $1,000 a month, which feels like an extra income drip to your household every month.
Right.
I want to be careful here, though. Even though it feels like income, it is not income. Therefore, it doesn't impact you tax-wise, has no impact on your pensions, okay? Because it is, in fact, a loan. But there are many people out there who, and you know this, live in $1 million, $2 million homes and are living on government CPP and OAS, and they're eating baked beans for dinner and canned food, and they're just living this very small life. And I wish more people knew about this, because as much as it's wonderful to have $1 million in equity, you can't eat equity, right?
Yeah.
You need to convert that equity into cash flow, which then can be something meaningful for you in your life, especially when you work so damn hard for what, 40 plus years to live this retirement, right?
Right.
This retirement dream, but your cash flow is $1,500 a month when it could be $3,000, $4,000 a month. You can travel, you can upgrade your cars, you can help your children. So this reverse mortgage product has its place, and we're seeing it being used as a very sophisticated financial planning tool, not just a product of last resort, but also for helping the sandwich generation in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That is exactly the sentiment that, we were discussing last time around, is that um you don't, especially in Toronto, with everything being so dense, it doesn't take a lot to find seniors in exactly that position that you just described, right? So, last week, and Charlene, we're discussing, and it's that phrase of being, house rich and cash poor, right? So in a way, they are enslaved to the house, right? And yet that house, although they paid it off, maybe 30 years ago or more, that house is not working for them. It's not providing financial benefit to them. The only benefit, at least in our vision, will only come to the next generation after these people, these original homeowners, have passed on. Everything is liquidated. Now there's cash, and then it goes again in another cycle, another circle. But it doesn't actually help, those three generations to function in a way that's healthy in the now versus in the future.
Yeah. So yeah, an example, a real life example inside of our brokerage is here the use of a reverse mortgage that helped multiple generations, all three of those generations that you referenced. So here's a situation. We've got an older woman, we'll call her grandma, and she's age 70 and she's mortgage free and she lives in a home worth more than $1 million. Okay. Now, her daughter and her daughter's husband are in their 40s. They have kids, and they've been renting as tenants up until now. They just haven't been able to get, the income or the down payment together. But now everything's coming together because they're going to be able to buy because the daughter is going back to work, and due to down payment and affordability issues, they can't buy in the neighborhood near grandma. They're going to have to buy an hour plus away just because of the ability to buy at a certain purchase price.
Right.
And in this scenario, and I know this is the case, there's many people who would love to be close to family, but they rarely see each other because they're just too far apart. And so here in this case, a solution which we came up with was grandma could access $300,000 equity. She could get a lot more, but we just chose to get 300 here. And of that 300, gift 200,000 to her daughter. And then her daughter can now buy a property that's much closer because they have a lot more down payment. And, on this one here, there's no income qualifying. This is true with reverse mortgages. You don't have to be earning much more than a regular pension. And there's no monthly repayment. So as much as we've gone into this $300,000 of debt, which with a regular mortgage would result in a payment of something like $1,700 a month, there's zero payment here. Okay. So that's the outcome. There's an extra 100 grand here. Remember, we got access to 300, but we only gave 200 to the children. That extra 100 goes to grandma, tax free. And with that, she can draw on it monthly to help with her bills. She can take her cruises. She can go and spend time with her extended family overseas if and when she wants to, right? And this is truly that win-win that we're talking about. Well, we should put a third win in there because it's the grandchildren as well that we didn't mention,
Right.
where, and I'm sure all of us have been the beneficiaries of those, extended family times, where we've got everybody helping each other. We've got grandma able to witness the joy that her potential future inheritance would have given to her family, but she gets to witness that impact while she's alive, and she gets to partake and enjoy in keeping the family together. So this is a perfect example of what you were referencing there, Craig.
Awesome. This is a really good representation of that. Are you seeing, on your side of the business, are you seeing this become more commonplace where, people are having these discussions about money earlier? Because I know in our generation it wasn't spoken about. You didn't know who had what from house to house. It was very sort of separate. Are you seeing, in and amongst sort of family lineages, the open discussion about, estate planning, finances, investments, even generational wealth and how we all work together as a family to make that
Right.
happen?
I'm
Yeah,
going
I
to
am seeing
add
that.
with I'm going to add to that and not just in the overall, but are you seeing a lot of that in our culture? Because we're of similar culture. So I'm just going to ask that question. Are people having that discussion? Because Greg and I have had many, many talks, and it seems that in our culture, it's like the elders, I'm going to say elders, don't want to, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about passing on and moving on and money matters and stuff like that. We need to change that. We need to change the mindset of it's okay. You have a house, mom, dad, whoever, and I need help, so I'm gonna, bring this up. What are you what are you seeing, Dion?
Okay, I got a lot to say here. So, in terms of culture, we have sort of the Canadian societal culture, and then we
Right.
have ethnic groupings
Hmm.
inside of that, which bring their own culture, right?
Right.
So, so let's talk about those things in general. So, in general, the Canadian psyche has always been, look, as long as I look after my job as a parent is to look after my children, right?
Hmm.
You wear that like a badge of honor, right?
Mm.
And looking after your children is feeding them, clothing them, giving good shelter, making sure they're healthy, and helping them financially to get educated, right? And I know in all cultures, education is held in the highest of regards, right? And and that is because the education used to be the pathway to an income, and that income, that stable, strong income, was the path to financial success,
Correct.
Hmm.
right? And so this is why education has been held as super high. And I know in Caribbean cultures, Indian, Chinese cultures, all of these cultures, education is key. Now, the funny thing is that that model is now broken because getting a good job is not enough. Not when a good job is 100 grand a year pay and the price of the average Toronto property is 1.1 million, 11
Hmm.
times that income, right? Even in the worst of the great recessions of 1990, the house price was around two, maybe three times household income. And prices were actually more affordable. The monthly payment was more affordable in some instances where we had a 20% interest rate than today when we have 5% interest rates.
Hmm.
Okay. So it's kind of crazy to think that. Now, also, and I find this a little bit ironic in that the same cultures, now I'm talking ethnic cultures, who put a lot of weight on education have consciously decided not to talk about money because how else will your children learn about money unless you educate them on
Right.
money,
Yeah.
right? So I find it a little bit of an oxymoron, right? I value education, but I'm not going to talk to my children about money.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in my
Yeah. Yeah.
mind,
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's the same thing.
Hmm.
So I can't solve the ethnic cultural challenge, right? But this is what I can say. You know who does talk about money with their kids?
Which
Wealthy
people?
people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we're all about education, then shouldn't we learn from the people who have worked this out
Yeah.
and figure out what they're doing? What are they doing that is different from what we are doing? And if it means that I have to break my frame of reference and break through some long held beliefs, then maybe I need to change, and change is hard. And that's the problem. The
Mm.
problem is resistance to change,
Hmm.
right? And oftentimes when people get older, they say, all my learning is done. I'm not out to learn anything else. Learning is for younger people, right? So the question may then be, how do we have these conversations? That's probably the question, right? And I can tell you that in my day-to-day business, this comes up quite a lot, where I will talk to that 30 or 40-year-old and I'll say, guys, you've done everything right and your parents have done everything right. But now the target that you were aiming for when you were 15 in the 20 years that has since passed, the target moved. And your parents did set you up for the right target at that time, but now the target has moved, right? And see, here's the thing. What happened in the last 10 years, guys, is property prices increased 2 or 3 times. 200, that means a property went from 300 grand to 900 grand. And you all know this to be true.
Yeah.
Okay. I own some of those properties, right? And when you look at those numbers, the people who benefited from that were people who already owned property, which is the parents of the people who are 30 or 40 years old.
Yeah.
Those parents are now 50 or 60 years old, right? And here's what I say to them. And this is the funny thought process that I go through with them. And I ask this question. Well, let me ask you guys. If you won $1 million in the lottery, would you give any of that to your family?
I
I'm
would.
asking you on screen. You got to
I
be
would.
honest, or you're gonna be honest to tell me the truth.
Wait a second. How many millions am I winning? Just 1 million?
One.
No.
Just one. The answer is $1 million.
I will.
The question is $1 million.
I will definitely take the million and give it, put it where it belongs.
Right. Okay. So when I ask this to rooms full of people, guys, I generally get, yeah, I'll give a portion. And I think that's fair. You want to probably pay off your debt, make sure your retirement's covered. But, there might be 20, 30% left over. Maybe you'll give away 200 or 300 grand to your children. Okay, let's just pick that as a number, 300 grand. Okay, great. So if you won the lottery, you give 300 grand to your children. Okay. Well, if you happened to own a property in Ontario in the last 10 years, you won the Ontario Property Lottery. And your house went from 300 grand to 900 grand in that 10 years period. And never in your life 10 years ago did you think your house would be worth 900 grand. Never.
No.
Okay. So you're the beneficiary of the lottery, but guess who are the innocent victims? It's your children who are trying to buy the house around the corner. And so it's this simple. You're going to have to give some of your lottery winnings to your children so that they can even think about living the life that you've lived, right? And getting their foot on that property ladder. And it really is a family effort now. I can't tell you, I could probably count on one hand how many first-time home buyers I've helped in the last 2 years who have done that purchase by themselves, right? And we've done hundreds of transactions. Very few of them can do it without help from parents.
No, I agree. You've definitely touched a nerve there. Again, Charlene and I were discussing, back in our day, talk, of what we were able to do. And I can't even do the math. I'm trying to remember when we bought our first property back in 1998, 99. And it honestly, it didn't feel, it was the equivalent of, how people feel buying a car today. It
Right.
wasn't stressful.
Okay.
Somehow we saved money. The world didn't come to an end. We still had, enough left over. We went on vacations. We still went out for dinner. We went to the movie theater. And then I look at how the world has changed in 25 years. And I've got 2 kids now one is wrapping up university and the other one is just getting ready to go. And I can clearly see that even with their education, once they're graduated and got a job, they can't buy back the life that they live currently, which again is a sobering thought for not just for them as kids, but as us as parents, saying go out in the world and make it, and know that they're going to be 2, 3, 4 rungs down the ladder right out of the gates. And that is with assistance to help with university costs and hopefully live at home when you go to university and save a few dollars there, and
Yeah.
all of those things. I can't imagine how a young person, let alone a new Canadian, um, is going to break into this property ladder. But like you said, which was really interesting, all of that, the majority of equity that we see out there is in the hands of people who have the ability to then share that wealth and fix those problems, at least within their own family dynamic. And the other thing that you said that was really interesting is we won the lottery in terms of having the property and the
Yeah.
education, right? So,
Literally, you're at the right place at the right time, right?
right.
Mhm.
But
And I'd love to think that it's because we're super smart. No, none of
no,
that.
no,
We
no,
just
no.
happen to be in the right place at the right time.
And I think that, when I hear people say, well, you know, I I can't afford to buy, or, we'll rent for a while, or, they've got all these other thoughts and schemes and ideas. Home ownership, at least in Canada, or I'll just speak in Toronto, if you can get it, it seems like the easiest forced savings, wealth building mechanism that will take care of you. So even if you're not the smartest person, if you come back, just stay the course, just listen to everything Dion said, make those payments, just have a regular job. You don't need to be a rocket scientist. 25 years from now, you'll look back and think, huh, that was smart.
Mhm.
And the bank is there. Like the money and the equity is there. And we could not gamify the stock market. We could not build companies or invest or do anything on a grand scale across the board that can compare to home ownership in terms of taking care of us. Without our homes, like, my wife and I are relatively intelligent, but without this home, we would be struggling in order to, make
Mm.
ends meet with other things as we become fixed income people, as, medical bills pile up, as our kids say, what, we're thinking of buying a bungalow in East York. What do we do? You would be tapped out so fast without that piece. So I'm glad you made that connection.
And it's so that means, Greg, you're one of those guys who are ready to write that lottery check to your children at some point in the near future, right?
Absolutely. And I again, had I gone back to, 20 years ago, I had the exact same discussion in my mind with my wife that you brought up. Well, it was hard for us. We did
Yeah,
it. We saved up. And I think back, like, I mean, everything is exponentially more expensive now,
yeah.
Yeah.
but the upside in terms of income hasn't kept pace.
Hmm.
Right.
Right? So, where we made a pretty decent living 25 years ago, our, you know, outlay to live that life was puny. It was tiny.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, just to survive, it's almost everything you make has to go towards just
And
mere
and
survival.
so to answer one of your earlier questions, how do we get people thinking differently? And to touch on this point, Greg, is ask ask yourselves, or the listeners, ask yourself, if I had to buy the house I live in today, if I was trying to buy my own house today, could I do it?
Mhm.
The answer for many of you will be no.
Mm-mm.
And if it's no for you, how do you think it's going to be yes for your children? Right.
Right.
So yeah, so these are some mental exercises you might have to do with some of your clients and their parents along the way here.
Right.
No, that was excellent.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, any questions, Charlene?
Um, I'm gonna do this. No, but I did like what you had to say about the larger culture of it all, the Canadian culture and the we're all at our individual cultures or what we identify as. And I think it's a conversation that needs to be had more often than not. That
Yep.
Yes, because when my parents came to this country and we bought our first house 5 years afterwards, it was $67,000. It was a four-bedroom, semi-detached, two-story in Malvern before Malvern was Malvern, right?
What
So
approximately what year was that, Charlie?
it was. And I'm hoping you don't guess how old I am,
I
right?
won't.
I'm sitting on the hot
He's
seat
a
here.
numbers
This
guy.
one, right? 1978.
Okay. Okay. You know
Yes,
what? And okay,
1978.
wait a second. How much was that house worth?
It was $67,000.
Okay, okay. I have to share this screen. I have to. Let me show you this.
Yes.
This is the
Yes.
average house price in 1978. Take a look at that.
And that
Wow.
was a brand new house, Dion. We didn't
67.
have grass on the lawn. It was mud until they laid the sod. That was how much we paid.
Well, the good news
Right.
is, according to the screen, you didn't overpay. You paid the average. So somehow
Paid
you
the
knew
average.
exactly
Right?
what to pay. You had a very good realtor back then.
Well, it was a new build. We bought from the builder. So you're saying the house at 67K in 1978 is now worth
On
1.126
average. On average.
on
Yeah.
average.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's about where I had it. I had it at close to 1 million,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because it is in Malvern.
Sure.
So, but yeah, it's a four-bedroom house, but you can't do that now. You cannot do that now. I forgot how much money my parents put down on the home. I think it was something ridiculous, like $5,000. So that is unheard of. It's
So,
absolutely
okay.
unheard
And I think this would be an interesting point to end on. And this is a conversation I literally had yesterday with a lady who lives in Scarborough, Jamaican lady, retired. She has three properties and she has two children.
of.
And
Mhm,
yesterday on a Zoom call just like this, I had all three of them on there. And we were talking about estate planning, adding
mhm.
these children to title on certain properties. These are
Right.
young women who are probably in their 20s, maybe
Hmm.
30s, and she's adding them to title now. One to the Toronto property, and I think she has another one in Mississauga. But yes, that she's in the process of doing this estate planning because she put the hard work in. She owned those assets for the longest possible time, and now she's transitioning those to her children and giving them their first step on the property ladder. And so, as much as today is about talking about a sandwich generation, I'd like to also address those people who have very young kids, right? Let's say you've got kids or you plan on having kids. Now is the time to start planning for that 20-year future by planting those seeds so that you can see that, I call it putting pieces on the chessboard. If you can
Yeah.
put more pieces on your chessboard, then you get to play a different game than
Hmm.
most people. And that's really what you should be doing at a younger age, accumulating as many assets as possible, which will give you as many choices as possible a little later in life.
Hmm.
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Well, my friend, you've dropped some gems today. Those are excellent. So
Oh,
Yeah.
your
I
job is done then.
it's done for today, but my mind is already, the wheels are already spinning. I would love to have you come back one day, and delve deeper into the whole premise of financial literacy and the education piece of how, because I don't think a lot of people understand, um, not just in the actions of doing the purchase and so on, or the reverse mortgage, but actually when, and the effect of compounding and having your kids benefit. So you spoke about the $250,000 at a younger age versus $1 million into the future.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Um,
we could
so
probably do another whole session on that. Yeah.
yeah, because I think that to me, is an eye-opening experience, right?
Totally.
Allowing you to play a completely different game,
Hmm.
because there's only a few factors that we can kind of play with, and that's time, money, and our health. Everything
Yeah.
else is kind of just blowing in the wind. We don't control all of those elements.
Hmm.
So
Right.
one of these days we'd love to sit down and delve in and
Yeah,
get your expertise, because you sound like you have
happy
a
to.
very good handle on this, and I think our
I love
viewers
this
would love
stuff.
to
Yeah, I
hear it.
mean, what we do is real estate and money, but it's really people's lives that we get to help,
Yeah.
along the way,
Right.
and that's the exciting part.
Right.